As she made her way down the hallway, Jill encountered her friend Thomas. "Good morning, Tom." "Hi Jill. Have you seen John Harrison?" "No, I was looking for him myself. I suppose we can find him together." Tom asked, "Isn't next week your 15-year anniversary?" "Yes, thanks for remembering. I understand they will give me a watch for my 15th anniversary." Tom rolled up his sleeve to show her his watch. "Yep, that's St. Paul. They give expensive watches after 15 years. The watches aren't too bad. Look at mine. It's a Movado Museum face. I'm sure it costs around $800 new. I wear it all the time. I was told they give a diamond lapel pin or tie clip $820, but I'm still 2 years away." She asked, "Why are you looking for Harrison?" "My computer's hard drive is going bad, and I need to get a new one. I need his approval to have it changed. He has to supervise all those kinds of repairs, in case anything goes missing." "Right, security is tight in your department. Although I'm a head security officer, I can't even observe that kind of repair. Anyway, Harrison left me a curious note this morning asking about Lab 16. A restricted shipment came in from Seattle last night and they put it in Lab 16. I passed the lab earlier and found it odd there were no restriction signs hung in the area or on the door." "Yeah, that seems odd, since they regulate every lab in the building if it's not empty." "I know. I guess it's probably not too important." Jill and Tom spent the next 15 minutes looking for Harrison. He was nowhere around. As they passed Lab 16, there were still no restriction signs. So, they went into the lab to check if Harrison was inside. Intending, if for no other reason, to find out who's responsible for the shipment in the lab, and caution that person, or persons, about their lack of security. Once inside, they found 2 large glass containers, both big enough to hold a full-grown human inside. Someone covered both with white tops. They lifted the first one to find a brain with its stem sitting near the top of the container. It was sitting in a slimy, murky solution. Jill lifted the one next to it where she found the top half of a child's body, a little girl. She was also placed at the top of the container in the same or similar solution. As they were observing, the child opened her eyes and looked at them with an expression of horror. Jill nearly fell to the floor. As a police officer, a detective, and 15 years as a security officer for St. Paul Corporation, she has seen a lot of things, but this was more disturbing than anything she'd seen before. "This is a child, Tom." Tom was already standing over at a desk reading a notebook. He saw the child and was trying to find information related to the containers. Tom handed her a notebook. "Look at this." She read the first page, which revealed why the containers were there. St. Paul was shipping them to San Diego from the Seattle labs and left them in Portland for 2 days while electricians finished the electrical circuits in San Diego. An impediment in the construction meant San Diego couldn't receive them yet, and the Portland complex was already equipped with the appropriate electrical circuits, and was the closest place to keep them until they could move them. Both noticed heavy cables coming from the wall to each of the containers. It tormented both Tom and Gil by what they saw. Neither one slept that night. What was St. Paul doing? Whatever it was, it can't be right. They both heard the rumors before, how St. Paul was always playing God. A corporation becomes so big only to assume they can do as they please, often acting above the law. One time, Jill came across a group of children being herded through a hallway. Afterward, she heard loud screams and crying. She planned to check it out when she acknowledged the restriction signs preventing her from doing so. After 2 minutes, everything became quiet. She never saw the children again. Jill dreamed all night about the child in the container. In her dream, she was walking the halls with those other children, and they were all screaming as they entered the lab and stood around the child in the container, all of them wanting her help. This time there were no restriction signs, so she determined to investigate further, even if it cost her job. That was a child in the container. Who knows whether the other brainstem belonged to another child? Tom wrestled with those same thoughts throughout the night. He needed to do something before they moved the containers to San Diego. Since Tom hardly slept that night, he rose early and left for work. Being so tired from lack of sleep, he almost ran into another car, lifting his head just in time to slam on his brakes. Man, I'm tired, he thought. Now, he was mad at St. Paul for kidnapping his sleep. When he got to work, Jill was waiting for him outside his lab. Jill only managed to whisper, "We need to do something." "Yes, I know. I couldn't sleep last night. I kept seeing that little face when I closed my eyes. I had the same problem. Any suggestions about what we should do? What would other people do? I mean, it's not every day you find a child, a live child in a lab, in an incubator no less." No, you don't. I suspect anyone who found what we did might go to the news or other media with evidence of the wrongdoing. That should bring St. Paul under investigation and hopefully protect us, whistleblowers. I agree, we need to go to the media. Tom, they aren't moving them until tomorrow, and they have hung no restriction signs so far. I passed by again this morning. So, tonight, after everyone goes home, we can go back in and collect whatever information we need to expose what St. Paul is doing with that child. Tom, do you understand they will review the surveillance tapes tomorrow night? Even though St. Paul doesn't place security cameras in the labs, the halls are crowded with them. If they find anything missing and catch us in the hallway outside the lab, they will fire us the following morning, not to mention the legal charges they will threaten us with. Are you prepared to go through that? There's no other option, and I can't just walk away. I can't. I keep asking myself if she's the only one. How many more are there? I can't walk away. Exactly. So, let's meet outside the lunchroom after everyone leaves work. Does 6 p.m. work for you? Yes, see you then. Tom walked to his lab and Jill left for her rounds. The day crawled along for Tom, who fell asleep at the table he was sitting at during lunch. Beth, a fellow researcher, tapped him on the shoulder to wake him. "Wake up, Tom. Have a late night last night?" "Not really, just work-related insomnia." "I know how that feels. I wouldn't get any sleep if it weren't for Saturday night. That's the only night I can sleep all night without waking up thinking about work. If it weren't for all the money we make, I'd find another job." Beth laughed and Tom smiled as they walked back to their lab. The last group of employees left the building just before 6 p.m. It was empty except for 3 security guards. At 6:10 p.m. Jill made her way to the lunchroom where she found Tom standing at the entrance waiting for her. They made one last comment whether what they were doing was the right thing. Both agreed it was. Once they got back into Lab 16, they both took videos of the scene and packed up everything they could find. When they examined the rest of the information on the desk, it became apparent what was taking place with those inside the containers. Most likely it was illegal, and at least an act against humanity. There was a large safe in the lab's corner. All the labs contained a safe for securing secret research materials. Jill was a chief security officer for St. Paul and held the highest clearance in the building. She held the keys to every door and memorized the combination to every safe in the building. St. Paul hired 3 people in each building and gave them alone that kind of access, expecting no one to use those keys or combinations except in an emergency. There were over 40 safes in the Portland location. Jill opened the lab safe, and they found 3 more boxes of files and other research material related to an experiment called the Angel Project. They took everything and left the building. Once outside the building, Tom said, "Jill, this is insane. What are we going to do?" "Well, we need to disclose this before they review the security tapes tomorrow night. Tom, you need to take the files to your house. I'll come over early tomorrow morning and we can go over the material. We'll figure out then how to expose this. I'm sure we will lose our jobs, and I'm sorry for getting you involved. Although, I'm terrified, I can't worry about that. I understood St. Paul's policies before I got involved. Once we expose this, we won't have anything to worry about. So, let's get this information to the media as soon as possible." "Okay, Tom. I'll see you in the morning. Goodbye." Jill left for home, and Tom took all the material to his house. He pored over it through the night. He uncovered a lot of disturbing information in the files. It was hard trying to fathom the experiments St. Paul was conducting and had been doing for years. Tom thought how his findings would blow Jill's mind when she found out what the rest of the files had to say, with all the scandalous things that have been going on, including the mischievous reason for St. Paul's incorporation. He stayed up all night and called in sick that morning. He assumed he would only return to work to be fired, anyway. Tom expected Jill to come to his home around 8 a.m. While waiting, he turned the TV on to watch the morning news. As the news came on, he was overcome with terror. Jill and her family were dead. The reporter called the act a murder-suicide. She said Gil's husband killed her and their 2 girls during the night and shot himself afterward. He knew Jill's husband would never kill his own family. St. Paul had them killed. He thought, how did they find out so fast? Now Tom was hysterical, so he packed all the files and put them in his car. He spent the rest of the day at the post office, the bank, and the police station. Once he got to the police station, he stopped the first officer he saw. "I have information concerning the death of the Avery family. Can you help me? Go to the 2nd floor and ask for Detectives Hill and Rodriguez. They are in charge of that case." When he found the 2 detectives, they brought him into a small conference room and asked him to sit and tell them what he thought happened. He showed them the video he took of the lab with his cell phone. He explained what he and Gil found and believed St. Paul killed Gil and her family. Hill said, "I investigated the scene at the Avery residence myself. It was a murder-suicide, and our medical examiner agrees with me. Mr. Miner, are you responsible for their deaths?" "No. St. Paul murdered them because of the information we took yesterday." "Mr. Miner, when I reviewed the video you showed us, I have to ask, did I observe anything criminal in your material? I would have to say no. Unless you murdered the Avery family, or know who did, the matter is closed as far as it concerns the Portland police. It was an open and shut case of murder-suicide." Hill stopped and stared at him. "Mr. Miner, did you steal that information from St. Paul?" "No, I'm a researcher for St. Paul, and the information I showed you came from my cell phone." Tom only showed the detectives the video on his cell. After that, it was clear they turned suspiciously towards him. After about a minute of silence, the detectives sat back in their chairs and continued staring at Tom. It was now clear they would do nothing about his friend's murder. "Thanks for coming in, Mr. Miner. If you come across anything concrete, please contact us." Hill led him to the exit. He was now questioning himself whether the research St. Paul conducted was illegal. It may not have been illegal, but Tom was confident it was unethical in the court of public opinion. Because of that, he was sure St. Paul would have to stop. He left the police station at 2 p.m. As he was leaving downtown Portland, he saw a dark blue sedan was following him. He stopped to get gas, and the vehicle stopped as well. He stopped at a small convenience store. The car parked across the street and waited for him. He needed to get somewhere safe. Then he thought of his friend Peter. Peter would help me out. At around 4:30 p.m., Tom pulled into a supermarket 3 blocks from Peter's home. The sedan pulled into the same parking lot. Tom figured they wouldn't follow much longer before approaching him. They weren't even trying to hide the fact they were following him. He entered the market and slipped out a back exit. From there he ran 3 blocks, turned right, and continued 2 blocks. He then made another right turn and proceeded 6 blocks, which brought him behind Peter's house. He cut through the back of the neighbor's yard and hopped Peter's fence, expecting or hoping no one saw him. Peter's neighbor didn't appear to be home, but he was uncertain whether another neighbor on the block could have seen him sneak through the yard. All he needed was for them to call the police on him and direct those men to Peter's home. After stashing his briefcase in the bushes, next to the back fence, Tom pulled a lounge chair onto the patio, next to the back of Peter's house. He nervously took a seat in the chair. He feared the wrong person might see his tall, gangly form from the other side of the fence. After all, He stood 6'7", and his bright red hair and freckly face stood out like a stoplight. 10-foot arborvitae and rhododendrons obscured 3/4 of the backyard, but that was only slightly reassuring. Peter spent several spring and summer vacations, turning it into a secret garden, which made it difficult, but not impossible to see the backyard. Then there was 15 feet of naked fence running alongside the driveway where anyone could observe the whole backyard. As he sat there feeling naked, he imagined the sun would have felt good, if he wasn't so afraid. "Man, Peter, where are you?" He wondered if he should leave town and not involve his friend. It was a tough decision he was wrestling with. Instead, "Come on, Peter. Where are you?" He shifted his attention to the fence along the driveway, expecting at any second a mysterious face, an assailant, would pop up and catch him. So, he pulled the lounge chair closer to the house and behind the garbage cans. 40 slow, labored minutes later, Peter pulled into the driveway. It was now 6 p.m., and Peter was home late because of a budget meeting. Tom peered over the gate to see if he was alone. He recognized Peter's 5'10" frame from behind the fence, but held off calling out until he was positive it was him, and to make sure he was alone. He couldn't help being paranoid. It was Peter all right, his short friend with his smart military haircut and goatee. Tom was sorry for what he was about to involve Peter with. Peter has worked for a local school district as a business manager and has done so for the last 15 years. As he stepped out of his car, while fumbling around with loose paperwork, Tom stuck his head out through the gate and hailed him in a whisper. "Hey, Peter." "Hi Tom. What's up? What are you doing in the backyard?" He put his fingers to his lips and gestured for him to be quiet. "Peter, let me in the back door. I need your help." Peter did as he asked. He and Thomas have been friends for 9 years. They first met when Thomas was giving a science lecture at the local high school for a group of talented and gifted, seniors. Thomas introduced AI, a field of science that fascinated Peter, as part of his lecture. So, he attended the assembly. They bumped into each other backstage afterward and got into a discussion about the lecture. He told Peter it was his first one and asked him what he thought. Peter told him he did a remarkable job and how he did not get enough and wished he spoke longer on the subject. Thomas mentioned to Peter he was lecturing the same evening at the University of Portland. Peter attended, and they met again afterward. Thomas brought his girlfriend, Cindy Halstead. She was a 9th grade science teacher in the same school district where Peter worked. She helped to bring Thomas to the high school for the lecture. Peter has been friends with Cindy since she got hired with the school district 10 years earlier. They went out for coffee that night, and the two remained friends since. Tom always made fun of Peter's baby face. Peter always made fun of Tom's clothes, which hung on him like a scarecrow. When you're so tall and thin, it's helpless to find form-fitting clothes. Frequently, when Tom spoke, you would need to pause on every word. He often repeated himself with less intelligent details so others could follow what he said. St. Paul speculated he had an IQ around 190. He liked Peter because Peter always held the conversation. Well, Peter learned how to shake his head like he understood what Tom was saying. Actually, they were only alike in that both exhibited a similar sense of humor and loved to laugh at their own dumb jokes. Most of the time, it was a lot of cerebral work for Peter to carry on a conversation with him. Tom almost chose a different route in life as he played basketball in college and was approached by several NBA scouts, but he rejected the sports career to work for the St. Paul Research Corporation, as he chose science over sports. That was 18 years ago. He and Peter often talked about St. Paul. St. Paul was an international leader in several innovative fields of scientific investigation, including artificial intelligence, robotics, quantum and astrophysics, and even stem cell research. Much of what St. Paul did was for the US government and deemed top secret. Even though Peter enjoyed discussing Tom's research in artificial intelligence and robotics, Tom often redacted much of those conversations with, "I can't talk about it," or "I can't tell you why I would have to kill you." Sometimes, his tone came across as serious. Peter often lamented that he pursued the wrong field of study. Instead of settling as a business major, he should have gone into a scientific field, and he regretted his decision. He often asked Tom to keep an eye open should any positions open in their business department. He would have left the district in a moment's notice to work for St. Paul. St. Paul's annual budget was in the billions. Its annual medical research grants alone were 13 billion. Budgets for other scientific research departments were several times that amount. Peter was positive St. Paul needed more accountants, and they regularly sent their business professionals to other countries. Peter thought at least he would love the travel. Because St. Paul provided research for most of the big corporations worldwide, St. Paul recruited just about every kind of PhD you can imagine, and often scouted potential research partners right out of high school, worldwide. They recruited Tom in his third year at MIT, when technology was more archaic. They paid his tuition for 3 PhDs, which included math, robotics, and computer science, AI in particular. Also, Tom carried several other master degrees, and was a perpetual student. He was within 15 credits of a medical doctor. It was mind-boggling considering how much education he endured. Often, Peter considered himself a caveman compared to him. Once inside, Tom said, "I need to leave town, and I need to get out today." He paused and stared at Peter, "But first, I have to go get Cindy." Cindy was the most important person in Tom's life. Peter thought it was unusual that they never married after such a long relationship. Both said they enjoyed their alone time. Tom told him that's what he appreciated about her, but Peter perceived both of them actually dreaded commitment. "Peter, if they find me, they will kill me." "You're not making sense, Tom. Slow down. Tell me who wants to kill you and why?" "I can't tell you. It will put you in danger." "Okay. If telling me is going to put me in danger, what are you doing here?" "Please, Peter. I need your help." "Okay, what can I do?" Tom looked in the fridge to find something to drink. He took a glass from the cupboard and filled it with lemonade and drank it in 2 gulps. "Come on, Tom, you're messing with my head, right?" "No, this is no joke. Yesterday a woman I work with, my friend, Jill, and I were looking for a man named John Harrison when we walked into a lab we shouldn't have gone into. We saw things in that lab we shouldn't have. What we saw was so bad that we both decided we needed to expose it. So, last night she and I returned to the lab after everyone left the building. We took photos and video of everything in the lab. We also confiscated all their research documents, including thumb drives from a safe in the lab. Peter, I'm freaking out, this is serious." Tom poured himself another glass of lemonade. "The less I tell you, the better it will be for you. I don't know where else to turn." Peter ignored his comment. "What was in the lab? Why did you go inside? Are you saying St. Paul is trying to have you killed?" "Yes, because they have already murdered Gil's family. We thought they wouldn't find out until tomorrow that we took the files from the lab. We intended to turn the research over to the news media today. I've never seen anything like that in my life, and in my wildest dreams, I have never imagined St. Paul or anyone, other than Dr. Frankenstein, could perform experiments like those in that lab. Again, I've seen remarkable research projects performed for St. Paul, but nothing this horrible. So, you two will become whistleblowers?" "Well, yes, that was the plan. Today we hoped to finish examining the material and give it to at least a couple news outlets." "Okay. I presume you said, the meeting never took place? And, instead of meeting with Jill, you hid in my backyard?" Tom was so emotional he became hoarse. He poured himself a 3rd cup of lemonade and took a drink. "Peter, they discovered Jill, her husband, and 2 children dead in their home this morning. They ruled it a murder-suicide. I know both Jill and her husband, and their conclusion is preposterous. That was the cause given. Someone murdered her and her family and covered it up." "That's terrible, and you're saying it has to do with what you and Jill saw in the lab? Why don't you tell the police?" "I did. They harassed me and asked me if I killed them. I told them I didn't, and afterward, they told me if I come across any more information to get back to them. Morons. Wow. They wouldn't listen to you. No. Peter, after talking to them, I'm not so sure what St. Paul is doing is illegal, and that's a big problem. In today's world, St. Paul might have every legal right to practice that kind of experimentation. Probably, the best we hoped to do was expose them to the public and hope for public outcry. I'm sure they killed Jill and her family, but by the time anyone can prove it, they'll bury the rest of us next to them. I want to expose them, but I don't want to die to do so. That makes sense, but you're making references to things you haven't told me about yet. You said something about experimentation. What exactly are they doing? I'm sorry. I'm extremely upset and probably not making any sense to you. What's most important about what I'm telling you is that St. Paul killed Jill and her family, and I believe they're capable of killing me and having it swept under the rug. Before that happens, I need to get the files to the media. Once the information is made public, I'll contact the police again. Afterward, they might come to find me, but Portland isn't a safe place for me right now. Tom's face turned white. Oh no. He ran out the back door. Peter followed him to the door as he ran across the yard to the bushes and returned with a briefcase. Once back inside, he handed Peter the briefcase. This briefcase contains all the information we needed to go public. Please hide it, and if I'm found dead, figure out how to get it to a news outlet. Do you have any suggestions? I'm not sure. In the past, St. Paul gave kickbacks to individual reporters so they wouldn't print bad articles about the corporation. It's rumor I've heard around the office for years. Unfortunately, I don't have a clue who those reporters are. I guess I could have given it to a reporter who might give it back to St. Paul without it seeing the light of day. You or I will have to find a reporter we can trust, probably someone outside the Portland or Salem area. Again, if they kill me, make sure you can trust the person you give them to. Just be careful. You can't just give them to anyone. All right, Tom. I don't expect to survive this. That's why I'm leaving them with you until I can get back and retrieve them. There are more files. I've already figured a way to get them to you, should I need to. I'm positive if this turns bad for me, you'll figure out what to do. Besides, right now Cindy's safety is my primary concern. I need to go get her. He gulped down the rest of his lemonade. Peter was a little confused because he was speaking so intense and fast, and fear saturated the room, which made it harder to comprehend. Tom put his hand on the briefcase. This briefcase contains research papers, 4 thumb drives, and 2 cell phones with videos. There's enough information in the case to give a cursory understanding of what kind of experiments St. Paul is conducting. I can't imagine what I have gotten myself into. I can't believe Jill and her family are dead. They were my family. His hands shook as he lifted them off the case. Well, you need to calm down. It will do you no good to lose control. Peter, this is insane. Will you help me out, brah? When he said brah, Peter became suspicious. He glanced at the briefcase and then Tom. Nothing he said, other than the fear behind what he was saying, made sense. Brah indeed, you're out of your mind. Are you messing with my head? Honestly, I don't believe corporations like St. Paul murder people. Don't be an idiot. They do, and if you don't do as I ask, I'll have to find someone else, but I don't know who else I can trust other than you outside of work. I don't want to tell Cindy, and I'm sure they're looking for her. I called her and we planned on meeting at 8 p.m. in front of Chu's restaurant. Peter, I have nowhere else to go. Tom walked into the living room and turned the TV on to a local news channel and waited. Peter opened the fridge to find something to eat while evaluating what he was being told, and the intensity in which he was being told. As he foraged, he thought, should I listen to him? Should I worry? Tom was so serious. Tom shouted, "Come here, Pete." Peter joined him in the living room just as the news about the murder-suicide of his co-worker and friend Jill was being updated. Now, it all became too real, and he needed to figure out what to do. He never considered anything like this could happen to him or his friends. His eyes focused on his friend, whose face was displaying both pain and horror. "Thomas, I'm sorry. I'll do whatever I can to help." Tom needed his help, and he was now all in. "You need to hide the information that's in the briefcase and don't be conspicuous. I'm sure they're figuring out who my friends and family are, and it won't be too long before they figure out where they all live. Take it out of the briefcase and put it in another container. I'll take the case with me when I leave. Since they're following me, they will assume I have the files with me. We need to act fast, and I should get going. I need to get to the restaurant and meet Cindy. Anyway, it's too dangerous for me to remain here any longer." Peter pulled a box from the utility room and put all the material into it. He took the box and put it at the bottom of a stack of similar boxes. Tom said, "Thanks, Peter. You're a good friend," as he peeked out the front window. "You said someone was following you?" "Yeah. Before I came here, 2 men were following me. I led them to the market. I parked there, entered, and slipped out the back. So they won't know where I've gone, but it won't take them long before they find out I gave them the slip. So, I need to go to meet Cindy. Let me use your cell." He called a cab to meet him on the corner 3 blocks the other way from the store where he parked his car. It would take him to get Cindy. Then, he said goodbye, handed Peter his cell back, and a manila envelope. "See you soon, Peter." He left through the back door. Peter watched as he jumped the fence and cut back through his neighbor's yard. If what Tom told him was true, he was also in danger. Despite that, he was more angry than afraid because they made his friend afraid. Peter opened the envelope Tom gave him. It contained cash, $110,000 in total. He stood there with his mouth gaping for a while until he realized that he too needed to have an escape plan. There could be no waiting for St. Paul to figure out who he was. The money only made him more worried. There was no other reason for Tom to have given him so much money. Consequently, he spent the whole night figuring out what to do. By morning, he was so fatigued he called in sick. At 10 a.m., Grace, his secretary, called. She told him 2 different people called into the office asking about him. She upset both callers because she could not give out personal information about him. Fortunately, that was district policy. He retrieved the box and left. First stop was the bank to withdraw his bank accounts, both checking and savings. When done, he was carrying $165,000 to go on the run with. Peter planned to leave town, expecting Tom would find him if he needed to contact him. Also, he needed to find a personality in the media he could trust. Perhaps a small-town reporter would be best. It has been a while since Peter visited the coast, so he was off to the beach, a place both he and Tom were familiar with, assuming he would come look for him there. On his way, he stopped at a mall and purchased a pay-as-you-go cell phone, a burner. Right away he called work to inform them he would be on vacation for the next month. Peter accrued 3 months of vacation and was previously encouraged to use it. He would use it now because he didn't have a choice. Grace tried to get him to tell her what was going on, but he kept the conversation to a minimum. He hoped it would blow over before having to return to work. Once at the beach, he rented a cabin under an assumed name, Jerry Reckless, and paid cash. It devastated Peter when he saw the evening news. They killed Thomas and Cindy. Both died in a single car accident on Highway 26, halfway up Mount Hood. Portland News said they drove over a cliff. It made him afraid, but sadder and angrier that this happened to his good friend. While they were showing pictures of the vehicle, he recognized the briefcase lying next to Cindy's car. It was open. He assumed they were trying to make a run for it. This was even worse than he imagined. They were his friends. What was so top secret that people were being killed for it, by a famous corporation, no less? Peter did not eat or sleep again that night. By morning he was so tired he passed out and didn't wake until 2 p.m. At which time he walked to a little store on the beach and bought a roast beef sandwich and soda. Peter was overcome with sadness as he walked along the surf, stopping only to take a bite of his sandwich and stare out onto the ocean. His sandwich just didn't taste right. What am I going to do? They killed my friends, Thomas, Cindy. He returned to the cabin at 6 p.m. There was no more news about his friends.